Have you ever found yourself wondering, why is it that you, someone kind, genuine, and patient, keep getting hurt by someone who never truly valued you? Someone you loved deeply, stayed loyal to, even sacrificed for. But in the end, it was they who made you lose sight of yourself? Or maybe, on a quiet night, you've looked back at everything and asked, why did I meet someone like that? Was the universe mistaken when it placed them in my life? But what if it wasn't a mistake at all? What if they didn't show up to break you, but to awaken something in you that's been asleep for a long time? And here's the truth that surprises many. The person who hurt you the most may have actually been the one who taught you the most about yourself, not with kindness, but through betrayal. Not with support, but through a fall that shook you to your core. Crossing paths with a narcissist might feel like a disaster, but through the lens of mindfulness and Buddhist wisdom, it can be seen as a doorway to liberation. A painful journey, yes, but a necessary one. One that helps you rediscover your true worth, understand the boundaries of compassion, and recognize that love doesn't have to mean suffering. In this video, we're not here to retell their story. We're here to explore your awakening, how silence became your strength, how kindness matured into clarity, how pain became the opening to peace. Let's peel back the layers of this lesson together and see why the narcissist was never karma's punishment, but a mirror reflecting the way back to your true self. 1. You're not weak. You're just deep. Some people walk into our lives like a gentle breeze. They make our hearts flutter, soften our defenses, and for a while, they make us believe maybe this is fate. Maybe this is a connection from a faraway lifetime. But before long, the truth starts to reveal itself. They didn't come to lift us up. They came to pull us down. With charming words that led nowhere, with coldness disguised as mystery, and with subtle manipulation that made us question our worth. When a narcissist enters your life, it rarely comes with flashing red lights. They don't show up with warning signs. They arrive like spring sunlight, warm, comforting, and slowly they burn through your boundaries. But what hurts most isn't what they did. It's how long you stayed, how long you kept giving, kept hoping, kept waiting for something that deep down you knew would never come. And then we blame ourselves. I'm weak, some say. I should have walked away sooner. But the truth is, you weren't weak. You were deep. You loved fully. You saw the good. You waited for the healing. You believed in change. And that's not a weakness. That's a rare kind of strength. Because only those with a deep heart only, those who believe in the human capacity to grow were willing to stay, love unconditionally, and hope for a miracle on behalf of someone else. Most people only see the outside, the endurance, the repeated forgiveness, the emotional toll. But they don't see the faith behind it, all the belief that maybe, just maybe, compassion could heal a wounded soul. The Buddha taught, no one is entirely evil. They're just covered in ignorance. And holding on to that truth, many people tried. They stayed. They believed that love could pierce through pain, that compassion could bring someone back from their darkness. But kindness doesn't always save someone who's trying to run from themselves. Some people don't want light. They want control. They don't want to heal. They want to be adored. Staying in such a relationship doesn't mean you're broken. It simply means you once loved with everything you had, and now you've learned to love without losing yourself. Awakening doesn't come in grand moments. It comes slowly. In the quiet nights, you cried alone. In the hollow apologies, you accepted. In the way you kept saying sorry, when deep down, you'd done nothing wrong. And then one day you stop hurting, not because they've changed, but because you've seen the illusion for what it truly was. What you called love was only a reflection of your own hope. A narcissist can make you doubt everything: your judgment, your intuition, even your kindness. But they're also the one who pushes you to turn inward and begin relearning the most sacred lesson: to love yourself. Loving yourself isn't selfish. Loving yourself is stopping the cycle of needing validation from those who don't see your worth. It's no longer fighting to be chosen because deep down, you were always enough. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful image: the lotus. The lotus doesn't choose clear water or muddy water. It just grows. It rises above the mud, unbothered, reaching toward the sun. And you who have walked away from a toxic relationship are like that lotus. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. Your very existence is already proof of your strength. Maybe back then you stayed because of faith, but today you leave because of wisdom. And that is not an ending. That's a beginning. 2. The narcissist isn't a punishment. They're a portal to awakening. Some people don't come into our lives to stay. They come to stir something. Not to build, but to touch the wounds we thought we had buried. Like a breeze that passes through, but leaves a tremor deep within. When a narcissist enters your life, you usually don't notice it at first. They don't come like a storm. They don't scream danger. They arrive with a gentle smile, sweet words, eyes full of charm. And that is what makes it so confusing. In the beginning, their attention feels like sunlight. You feel seen. You feel special. For those who grew up emotionally neglected or spent a lifetime trying to earn love, that attention feels like rain in a desert. So you open your heart. You begin to trust, to hope, and you start giving little by little. But slowly, that light becomes blinding. The sweetness turns conditional. Love becomes something to be earned. Compliments are used as tools of control. And suddenly, you feel anxious, but you don't know why. A part of you senses something is off, but you don't trust your own intuition. You start wondering, am I just being too sensitive? Am I ruining something that's actually good? Zen Buddhism teaches, it's in the darkness that we recognize the light. It's in the breaking that we see the true shape of our mind. When a narcissist appears, they don't just confuse your life. They awaken the corners of you that were abandoned, the places where you once felt unworthy, the old scars that still whisper, prove you deserve to be loved. They don't create your wounds. They trigger what's already there, the pain that never fully healed. The mistaken beliefs you once learned that love means sacrifice, silence, or slowly losing yourself to please someone else. From a Buddhist lens, the narcissist isn't a punishment. They're a karmic mirror sent, not to destroy you, but to reveal you. Like a mirror under harsh light, they show you the lines, the cracks, the truths you've never dared to face. People often ask, why did I meet someone like this? Is this karma from a past life? Am I being punished? But maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's a wake-up call. The universe or your own karmic journey didn't send this person to punish you, but to help you learn the final lesson, the truth about your worth. Because as long as you believe love must come with pain, you'll keep staying. As long as you think you need to make someone happy in order to be loved, you'll keep sacrificing. And as long as you don't realize that true love feels like freedom, not control, you'll keep attracting those who only know how to take. The narcissist didn't come for you to hate them. They came so you could release an older version of yourself, the one who forgives too quickly, who tolerates too much, who silences their feelings just to preserve something toxic. And in that process, you begin to see it all more clearly. You remember the times you said, "It's okay," when your heart was actually breaking. The nights you cried in silence because they ignored you, but still smiled the next morning like nothing happened. The times you blamed yourself just to protect them from guilt. These are not signs of weakness. They're signs of a heart that loved too deeply but pointed in the wrong direction. And whether the narcissist meant to or not, they became a mirror showing you where compassion ends and self-betrayal begins. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to liberation. Liberation is the path." And sometimes that path begins with someone who breaks you wide open. But in that breaking, you return to your truest self. You realize love isn't supposed to hurt, and kindness shouldn't cost you your peace. The narcissist isn't someone you need to resent forever. They are someone you might quietly bow to, one day not out of affection, but out of clarity, because they helped you see something you couldn't see alone. You were ready to heal. And you deserve a love that doesn't ask you to shrink. In the end, they're not the closing chapter. They're the turning point. The fire that burned away illusions about love and ego so that you could begin a new journey. One where you no longer need to be chosen, because you've finally chosen yourself. When a narcissist leaves your life, what remains isn't a holate space. And in that space, something sacred is born, rebirth. In that quiet, you come to see. No one can take your inner light unless you hand it to them. They were the gate, not to hell, but to awakening. Not because they were noble, but because you were deep enough to learn, even from pain. 3. Compassion without wisdom becomes a trap. Here's a truth not everyone wants to face, though most of us have felt it deep down. We've all loved the wrong way before. Not because our hearts weren't big enough, but because we didn't understand the limits of compassion. Not because we lacked kindness, but because we confused forgiveness with self-deception. In the deepest relationships, especially those involving someone with narcissistic traits, compassion, when not guided by wisdom, becomes a trap. A golden net we wrap around ourselves. At first, compassion makes us generous. We forgive, we empathize. We tell ourselves everyone carries pain. Maybe their behavior comes from wounds we don't see. We believe that if we're just patient enough, loving enough, they'll change. They'll grow into the better version of themselves. And that's where we start losing ourselves. Because when a narcissist realizes that you'll always forgive, that you'll always find a reason to excuse their behavior, they don't change. They just become more skillful. They begin to use your goodness to control your emotions. One harsh word is followed by a sweet gesture. Then the same cycle starts again. Every time you try to walk away, they apologize. Every time you set a boundary, they remind you of old memories just enough to soften your heart. The Buddha taught, true compassion must arise from wisdom, because compassion isn't softness. It isn't letting someone hurt you over and over again while you keep smiling through it. Real compassion is inner strength, and that strength includes knowing when to open your heart and when to walk away. Too often, we misunderstand. We think forgiveness is noble, and yes, it is. But forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring the truth. It doesn't mean going back to someone who has no intention of changing. It doesn't mean allowing someone to continue hurting you just because you're afraid they might hurt if you leave. Narcissists teach us this lesson in the hardest way. They're excellent at reading your emotions, but they don't care about them. They use kindness as a tool. They don't necessarily want to hurt you, but they also don't mind if you're in pain. What matters to them is being admired, being obeyed, being the center of attention. And when your heart is pulled too far, when your wisdom falls asleep, you become a shadow of yourself. You sacrifice your inner voice to maintain a relationship that's already falling apart. You start telling yourself, maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe if I change, things will get better. But then comes a moment, maybe late at night, when everything is still, or maybe during a cry that feels like it never ends, when the truth finally becomes clear. This isn't love. This is emotional dependency. This is the trap of compassion without boundaries. There's an old saying, kindness without wisdom is like a boat without a rudder. It drifts wherever others want, not where you truly need to go. And that's the awakening many people arrive at: those who have loved blindly, forgiven endlessly, and endured for far too long. None of us are born knowing how to protect our hearts. Most of us learn it through heartbreak, through being used, through calling something love, while slowly feeling emptied. And it's those very moments that teach the most powerful lesson. Compassion isn't about keeping someone else in your life. It's about keeping yourself from drowning in darkness. In Buddhism, compassion is always paired with upeksha, wisdom of letting go. A sincere practitioner isn't just compassionate toward others, but toward themselves as well. They know when to act from love and when to step back, so they don't keep planting seeds of suffering. Honestly, the hardest thing isn't giving. It's knowing when to stop. To stop when your love no longer helps them grow but makes you shrink. To stop when you realize you're drifting away from your true self. To stop not out of hate, but because you finally see the truth. When a narcissist refuses to change, the one thing that must change is how you see and respond to them. You don't need to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You don't have to force a connection that was never meant to last. You're not responsible for carrying a burden they never even asked you to hold. Kindness is precious, but kindness with wisdom, that's sacred. And boundaries are the expression of that sacred compassion. A wide open heart doesn't mean it has no fence. That fence isn't to keep others out, it's to remind you that even love must be rooted in clarity. Maybe you've forgiven too many times. Maybe you've sacrificed in silence. Maybe you thought holding on was the highest form of compassion. But if there's one lesson to carry with you from it all, it's this. You've learned how to love with both your heart and your wisdom. And in that learning, you're no longer trapped in the spiral of narcissistic cycles. You start asking yourself, is my kindness being used? Is my forgiveness feeding a fantasy? Is this love causing me to lose myself? And when the answers become clear, peace begins to return. You don't need anger. You don't need to explain. You don't even need closure. Because what you're holding on to now isn't the relationship, it's the awakening that came after the long sleep. 4. Silence is the beginning of freedom. There are moments in life when people talk too much, but understand too little. Words come out easily, like flowing water, but the truth stays buried somewhere beneath it all. And in that exhaustion, something unexpected begins to appear. Silence. The very thing that used to seem weak suddenly becomes the only thing holding us together. After a tense relationship, after too many arguments where no one really listened, after pouring out your heart only to be met with denial, you start to realize something. Saying more won't help. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because the heart has learned a deeper truth. Truth doesn't need to scream. It only needs to be seen clearly. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "The wise do not speak much. The wise know when to be silent." Because sometimes words are just the echo of ego trying to assert itself, defend itself, prove it's right. But when truth is finally seen for what it is, silence no longer looks like weakness. It becomes a posture of wisdom. A narcissist often masters the art of manipulation through words. They twist the story, bend reality, and leave you questioning your own perception. And the first reflex of someone who once loved them is to argue, to explain, to beg, "Please see my side. I'm not wrong. I have feelings too. I deserve to be heard." But the more you speak, the more you lose connection with yourself. The more you try to explain, the deeper you sink into a mazy zone where they always hold the key. Until one day, perhaps on a quiet afternoon with no warning, you just stop wanting to talk. Not because you're out of words, but because your heart no longer seeks to be understood by someone who never truly wanted to understand. And that silence, that's the turning point. No more fighting. No more seeking validation. No more long texts trying to clear things up. No more tears over being misunderstood. Just silence. And in that silence, freedom begins to breathe. Silence is the moment you come back to yourself. When you finally hear your own voice, the one that's been drowned out for so long by noise, logic, and expectation. It's when you realize that the goal is not to win an argument, but to walk away from one that no longer serves your peace. In meditation, the breath is a symbol of returning. No words, no effort, just presence, breath, and awareness. Likewise, silence in a toxic relationship isn't giving up, it's a return to the inner space where your soul remains whole. A narcissist doesn't fear conflict, they often feed off it to maintain control. But what they do fear is silence. Because when you no longer react, they lose their grip. When you no longer engage, they begin to feel empty. When you stop explaining, they can no longer pull you back into their drama. Silence becomes an invisible sword. It doesn't wound anyone, but it cuts through every illusion. That silence isn't cold. It isn't hateful. It's the quiet that comes when you finally see there's nothing left to save in something that's been broken from within. Some might ask, but if I stay quiet, won't they think I'm wrong? That I'm weak? The answer is, let them. You weren't born to manage how others see you. You were born to protect your inner peace. And if someone sees weakness in silence, it's because they've never felt the kind of pain that forced you to choose it. The Buddha said, silence is the master of speech. He never told us to be mute forever, but to know when to speak and when to stop. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't to raise your voice, but to let go of the need to be understood. Silence can also be the final word of a soul that has endured enough to know, if you have to fight to be loved, it's not love. If you constantly have to explain yourself to be accepted, it's not understanding. If you have to scream just to be seen, you're probably standing in the wrong place. Someone who truly loves you will hear you even in your silence. Someone who truly values you will understand you even when you say nothing at all. And if that presence isn't there, then silence is the better choice. It's the path that protects you from losing yourself in a never-ending battle for approval. Freedom doesn't come from the other person changing. It comes from the moment you stop placing your emotional well-being in their hands. And more often than not, that moment begins with silence. Not the silence of someone who's given up, but the silence of someone who finally understands. Understands that not everyone deserves to see all the beauty inside of you. Understands that some relationships aren't meant to last but to lead you back home. Understands that you don't need to win anymore. You just need to be free. 5. Pain is the gate to awakening. No one walks into a relationship hoping to be hurt. No one looks at someone they trust and thinks, this person will be the one who breaks me. But life rarely goes according to our expectations. And often, it's the things we didn't ask for that change us the most. Sometimes, the very person who brings us the deepest pain also opens the door to our awakening. In Buddhism, there's a powerful image, the lotus. A lotus only grows in the mud, not on rocks, not in clean, clear air, but in mud-dark, wet, heavy where beauty seems impossible. Yet from that mud, the lotus rises. Every petal that opens is a quiet reminder. Pain is not the end. It's the beginning of something deeper, the soul's unfolding. Falling in love with a narcissist may be one of the most painful experiences anyone can face, because they don't just hurt you with their words or actions, they make you question yourself. They twist your reality. They make you doubt what's real and what's not, what's love and what's manipulation. And worst of all, they make you believe you deserve it. But one day, somewhere in the chaos, truth starts to surface. You begin to see, if it weren't for the lies, you might never have understood the value of honesty. If it weren't for the manipulation, you may never have learned to trust your intuition. If you hadn't been pushed to the edge, you wouldn't have found the courage to say, enough. In the Four Noble Truths, the very first thing the Buddha taught was this: life is suffering, dukkha. But he didn't stop there. He didn't tell us to simply accept our pain and endure it forever. He showed us that when we understand the nature of suffering, the path to freedom begins to unfold. Think about it. Before the heartbreak, did you ever set boundaries? Did you ever stop to listen to that quiet inner voice when something felt off? Did you ever ask yourself if you were living in alignment with your own values? Probably not, because before the mud shows up, the lotus is still asleep beneath the surface. And mudlets, be honest, isn't pleasant. Mud is when you're treated poorly, but you keep finding reasons to stay. Mud is sitting in silence at night, waiting for a message, a single apology, only to be met with more coldness. Mud is when you smile on the outside, while your heart quietly cries on the inside. It's when you ask yourself, am I overreacting? Even when your heart is screaming that something isn't right. But through each layer of that mud, something starts to shift. You learn. You learn to stay silent, not out of fear, but because you no longer want to engage in what's meaningless. You learn to say, "Nah, not," out of anger, but because you finally believe you deserve better. You learn to walk away, not because you're cold, but because you've seen your own worth too clearly to stay. Pain isn't born to punish us. Pain is a teacher. Not a gentle one, but always precise. And the lessons it brings are often the kind that no book, no advice, no meditation can teach. Only when the heart has cracked open do we see all the things we've been carrying that no longer serve us. Only when we've been emptied can we truly begin to listen to ourselves. There's a Zen saying that goes, "Where there is suffering, there is a doorway to truth." Because truth doesn't live in the comfort zone. It doesn't come to us when everything's easy. Truth arrives when illusions fall apart. And nothing shatters illusions more than the heartbreak caused by someone you trusted deeply. From a spiritual lens, the narcissist isn't just someone who caused harm. They are the mud, not to be hated, but to remind you, you've been the lotus all along. You just hadn't risen yet. None of us wants to walk that path, but once we do, let's not forget what we found wasn't just a lesson about Thamit, was a lesson about ourselves, that we're not as weak as we once believed, that our kindness was never a mistake, that we're not too sensitive, we were just in the wrong place for too long. And now, standing on the other side of all that pain, there's nothing to regret. Because what you have know is clarity, eyes that recognize what's real, a heart that knows how to love itself before it loves anyone else, a mind that stopped searching for someone to complete it because it finally understands you were already whole from within. The Buddha once said, "The mind is like the earth. Whatever is thrown on it, clean or dirty, it receives and transforms. And you, after everything you've been through, you are becoming that earth. Not resisting, not blaming, just quietly, deeply becoming, the kind of strength that only grows from loss, the kind of calm that only comes after chaos, the kind of wisdom that only pain can unlock." 6. You're not broken. You've been reborn. There are moments in life when it feels like you're falling apart. You step out of a relationship. You gave your whole heart to your honesty, your trust, your time only to realize that the other person couldn't stay. Not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't capable of seeing the goodness in you. At first, their leaving feels like a loss, a sharp kind of pain that reaches deep into your bones. Food loses its taste. Sleep comes and goes. The things that used to feel familiar now turn into memories that ache. It feels like your whole inner world is crumbling. But then, slowly and quietly, something unexpected begins to grow. A sense of return. Not a return to a place, but a return to yourself. In Buddhism, there's a powerful image. Fire doesn't destroy, gold it purifies it. And often, the most painful breakups are the ones that reveal the purest part of your soul. The part that got buried under hope, expectations, and the willingness to give so much that you lost pieces of yourself along the way. People call it falling apart. But the truth is, nothing really broke except the ego that was clinging to something no longer meant for you. The relationship didn't make you less. It simply removed the parts of you that had stopped serving your growth. It's like the story of a young monk who once said to the Buddha, "Master, I feel like I'm losing everything. I'm not the same person I used to be." And the Buddha smiled and said, "Good. Now there's room for something new." Rebirth doesn't happen just once in a lifetime. It happens every time you're brave enough to let go of an outdated version of yourself, the version that stayed quiet to avoid losing someone, that overgave just to feel seen, that kept bending just to keep the peace. And when everything seems to fall apart, what's left isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for truth. Space for peace. Space to hear your own voice again, the one that was drowned out in all the noise of a lopsided relationship. In meditation, we're not trying to become anything. We just sit and return. Return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to the quiet movements within. And just like that, after heartbreak, if we slow down and sit with it, we realize something. Nothing was ever truly lost. We're simply being given ourselves again. The person who walked out of your life didn't take your heart with them. What they left behind was a mirror, so you could finally look at your own heart, see how much of it was still alive, how much was just habit, how much was fear, and how much was the longing to feel enough. And when you gather all those parts, place them in the light of mindfulness, you begin to see you were never weak. You just loved in a way that didn't love you back. Awakening, at its simplest, isn't about understanding something mystical. It's about seeing the truth and no longer resisting it. When you realize that you don't need someone else to choose you in order to feel worthy, that's where freedom begins. And the version of you that rises after all this, that's someone who no longer needs to prove anything, no longer tries to fit into someone else's expectations, no longer chases outside validation. Because now you know, there's a part of you that's always been whole, always been beautiful, always been enough, whether others saw it or not. That version of you is who you are after rebirth. You're no longer begging to be understood. You're learning to understand yourself. No longer waiting for someone to heal you, you're gently holding the parts of you that still ache. No longer needing someone to fill the emptiness, you realize that space is where your light begins to grow. The Buddha taught, all things are impermanent. When you truly see impermanence, you see the root of suffering. And when you see suffering clearly, the path to freedom opens. And that path, you've already begun to walk it, not through theory, but through lived experience. That breakup, painful as it was, didn't destroy you. It simply cleared out what had to go. The illusions, the waiting, the unspoken contracts that kept you small. And from within the ashes, you rose. Not with noise, not with haste, but with clarity, with calm, with freedom. No one is reborn with fireworks. We are reborn in silence, when there's no more resentment, no more blaming, just a quiet gratitude for the pain that brought you back home. Because without that breaking point, you might not have seen yourself. You might not have realized how deeply you love, how fiercely you care, how gently you still hold compassion even in the end. And if someone couldn't see the beauty in that, then their leaving wasn't a loss. It was a gift. 7. You weren't sent to heal them. There's a quiet but persistent belief that lives in many kind-hearted people. If I'm patient enough, compassionate enough, loving enough, they'll change. If I just don't give up, one day they'll realize it, wake up, and grow because I stayed. That belief is beautiful. But it's also the very thing that keeps your heart breaking longer than it needs to. There's an old Buddhist story about a young disciple full of fire and good intentions. He had a friend who had strayed far from the path, chasing pleasure and forgetting his practice. So the disciple gave it everything he had: advice, late-night prayers, heartfelt talk shopping. His friend would come back to his senses. But the more he tried, the further his friend drifted. Finally, exhausted and heart-heavy, he went to the elder monk and asked, "I've done everything I could. Why won't he wake up?" The old monk smiled and said gently, "You forgot. You're not the Buddha." That one sentence light as a feather, but heavy enough to lift a burden off your soul. Because it's true. You're not the Buddha. You weren't sent here to heal someone who isn't ready to face their own wounds. It doesn't matter how much love you bring, how much wisdom, how much sincerity. If they're not willing to look in the mirror, your light can't reach them. People with narcissistic tendencies often reject the truth. They don't want to face their own hurt, mistakes, or flaws. They prefer the spotlight to be admired, not reflected. And when you, with all your honesty and care, hold up a mirror to them, what do? They shatter it. Not because the mirror is wrong, but because the reflection shows them what they've tried so hard to hide. And that's when you realize your role was never to be their healer. Your role was simply to be a reminder that another path exists. Maybe they won't take that path. Maybe they'll turn away and choose illusion over truth. But that doesn't make your presence any less meaningful. You didn't fail because they didn't change. You only fail if you lose yourself trying to save them. In the Middle-length discourses, the Buddha said, "I am only a pointer to the path. Each person must walk it themselves. And you, as loving and wise as you are, can only walk with someone as far as they allow. The rest is up to them." You weren't born to be anyone's savior. No one was. Not monks, not teachers, not even those who love with all their heart. Because awakening is a solo journey. Everyone blooms in their own time. You can't force a seed to sprout if it's not ready. Maybe you've tried everything, said all the right things, loved with kindness and sincerity, and still they walked away. Still they blamed you. Still they shut you out. That doesn't mean you weren't enough. It just means they weren't ready to receive what's good. And eventually, you'll have to let go. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally realize staying doesn't help anyone. Staying only makes you forget who you are. Staying feeds the illusion that you can change someone by trying harder. But the truth is, no one changes for someone else. People only change when they've hurt enough to say, "I can't keep living like this." When they finally realize, "I need to help myself." And that is out of your hands. So remember, you're not their light. You're just the curtain that briefly opened. So their own light, if it exists, could shine through. If they choose to shut their eyes, that's not your burden to carry. Your job, is to tend to the light inside you. On the path of spiritual practice, compassion doesn't mean carrying everyone's suffering on your back. Compassion, when paired with wisdom, knows when to step back, knows when love becomes attachment disguised as saving. You cannot rescue someone from themselves. What you can do is stand beside them fully present, but unattached. Offer kindness without abandoning truth. Give them a chance and know when it's time to walk away. If a narcissist could truly look into the mirror, they might not hurt others the way they do, but they don't want to see. And when you try to show them, their instinct is to break that mirror. Don't keep clutching the broken glass. Don't let it keep cutting you again and again. Lay it down and walk forward, heart, lighter, free from the weight of false hopes. 8. The power of walking away in peace. There comes a moment in life when you face one of the hardest decisions: to walk away, even when your heart still loves. To leave, not because the love is gone, but because your soul is tired. Because deep down, you've finally seen the truth. That love, while once beautiful, is no longer healthy, no longer pure, no longer a reflection of who you both really are. When someone hurts you over and over again, our first instinct is to react, to get angry, to fight back, to try and make them understand just how much pain they caused, to show them they lost something precious. It's natural. It's self-defense. But after the arguments fade, after you've said all you needed to say and still weren't heard, there comes a quiet turning point where silence starts to speak. And in that stillness, a new door opens. The door of peaceful letting go. No need for hate, no need to win, no need for anyone to decide who was right or wrong. Just the quiet strength of leaving with peace in your heart. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Hatred is never ended by hatred. Only by love is hatred ended." This is an eternal truth. And one of the deepest forms of love is letting go without holding on to resentment. Because hatred doesn't bind them. It binds you. It traps you in a story that's already ended. It keeps your mind stuck in what you can't change. It feeds thoughts of revenge, hoping they'll get what they deserve. But none of that sets you free. It only weighs your heart down more. Letting go isn't the end of a relationship. It's the end of an illusion. The illusion that you could change someone, that you could make them love better, that if you just tried a little harder, they'd finally get it. But here's the truth. Not everyone can love. Not everyone wants to heal. Not everyone values the good that comes their way. That's not your fault. And it's no longer your responsibility. Walking away in peace is how you tell life. I gave my whole heart. Now I choose peace. There's a Buddhist story where the Buddha and his disciples were traveling, and a man began yelling at them, insulting them harshly. A young monk got upset and asked, "Why don't you respond to him, Lord? Why just sit and take it?" The Buddha calmly replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, who does it belong to?" The monk answered, "To the giver." The Buddha smiled and said, "Exactly. If someone offers you their anger and you don't receive it, it stays with them. To walk away without anger, without bitterness, without needing to be understood. That's real strength. That's real freedom. And the best part? Anyone can learn to do that. You don't have to be fully enlightened. You just need a heart that's grown through life's hits and a soul that's quieted through reflection. When you walk away in peace, it doesn't mean they won. It means you won over yourself, over your ego that wanted to prove a point, over the urge to retaliate, over the fear of being left behind, and most of all over the pain that told you you had to hold on just to feel loved. Remember, You don't forgive someone because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It isn't about approving what happened. It's about saying, this wound will no longer run my life. You're not weak because you cried. You're strong because you didn't let those tears keep you stuck. You didn't lose because you left. You won because you left at the right time, and you left in peace. Peace doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly. In each morning, you wake up without that heavy heart. In every night, you go to sleep without replaying old conversations. In every moment, you choose to live for you again, not for someone who's no longer there. Real freedom isn't being with the one you love. It's no longer being controlled by the one who hurt you. And the miracle is that freedom is already in your hands. No one else can give it to you. No one can take it away. Only you get to choose whether to hold on or let go. 9. Awakening begins after you leave them. There's a strange paradox on the path to awakening. Often, we don't truly see life clearly until we choose to walk away from someone. Not while you're still in that relationship when everything feels torn between love and pain, between hope and disappointment, but after. Once the dust settles, when there are no unread messages, no awkward dinners, no hollow hugs meant to calm your unease. The moment you leave, space opens up. And in that emptiness, the first whisper of your soul starts to rise. It's a gentle voice you couldn't hear before, outspoken by the storms of emotion, endless mental chatter, and the exhaustion of trying to please others. Now, no one is pushing you to be a version of yourself they can fit. No one is pulling you away from your truth with empty affirmations. And in that calm, you begin to truly hear you. The Buddha said, a mind unmoving amid all the world's changes. But to reach that steadiness, we often have to move through the relationships that shook us most. Those moments reveal where we were weak, living just to gain approval. Walking away isn't an ending. It's the start of seeing life through eyes sharpened by truth, not colored by naive hope. Before, you might have mistaken red flags for just my sensitivity, labeled disrespect as, he's just going through a rough time, sugar-coated those warning signs to avoid believing someone you loved could hurt you. But when you step away, those flags stand starkly as signs, not excuses. That's awakening. True clarity doesn't come from a dramatic mountain retreat. It comes walking through everyday life when your mind begins to brighten, when you cross your old street without pain, when a shared song no longer brings tears, when you look in the mirror and see your own eyes light up again. That light isn't someone else's. It's yours, kindled after forgetting who you are. In an ancient sutra, the Buddha shared a story of a woman who lost her child. Desperate, she begged everyone to bring her child back, but no one could. Finally, the Buddha asked her to find a mustard seed from a household that had never experienced death. She searched everywhere, but such a place didn't exist. Then realization struck. Suffering is universal, and from that understanding, awakening blooms. Awakening starts with accepting that only you can make yourself whole. No one else can fill the gap created by losing yourself. The person who hurt you, they were just a mirror, a cracked mirror, enough to reflect what you hadn't faced: the old wounds, the nameless fears, and mistaken beliefs about love and worthiness. Now, you don't need someone else's eyes to validate your value. You ask yourself, does this align with my truth? Does this piece nurture me? And you lean into what's real rather than lean on them. That's the mark of a soul grown. It's maturity formed not by years, but by daring to face the truth and beginning to heal your own internal neglect. From this moment on, You'll only enter a relationship if your heart is already full, no longer seeking to patch a void. You'll love, not from fear of loneliness, but because the other brings joy, not anxiety. And if no one comes, that's okay. Because now you have the one thing that matters most. You know how to be with you, and that's enough. 10. Karma is clarity, not punishment. Some people enter our lives like a storm moving in, unexpectedly, stirring everything up, leaving us shattered, exhausted, even lost. And when they leave, we often ask, why did I meet someone like that? Many label it bad karma, and they sigh, saying, I must have heavy karma, as if they're being punished by some unseen, foreseen, escapable, unchanging. But if you listen closely to the Buddhist teaching, you'll realize karma is not punishment. Karma is a mirror, and what it reflects is already inside you. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, beings are the owners of their karma, their heirs, born of their karma. It's not a warning, it's a reminder. Everything you experience has a root hand. That root isn't outside. You didn't meet the narcissist by chance. They didn't show up as a cosmic prank. They came because somewhere deep within you, held beliefs awaited illumination. Hidden wounds awaited healing. Whispers like, I must earn my worth, or I must please to matter. And that person, with all their insecurity, manipulation, and control, created a rupture in those wounds, not to heal them, but to expose them. Karma didn't aim to punish you. It simply brought you to a place where you had to see what you'd been ignoring. It's like an injury on your arm you never noticed until someone bumps it and you feel the pain. The person didn't cause the injury, they just touched a wound that was already there. The same with a narcissist. They're the touch. The root lies in the parts of you that traded self-respect for affection, that stayed silent to keep peace while feeling broken, that gave everything and still felt not enough. Had you not carried those wounds inwardly, they wouldn't have stayed long. You wouldn't have been manipulated. You wouldn't have doubted yourself. So karma isn't punishment. It's clarity. Clarity about where you really stand, what needs healing, which beliefs are outdated, and recognizing when it's time to let go. There's a Jataka stories of the Buddha's past lives about a king once proud, contemptuous, arrogant, treating servants poorly. In his next life, he's reborn as a servant, serving someone he once looked down upon. It wasn't punishment. It was the consequence of his own actions. No deity forced it. Karma simply produced its own fruit. You once let faulty beliefs guide you. Karma brought you full circle so you could see them. And once you see, those old patterns no longer hold. Karma's job revealing completes. Some, seeing the truth, turn away. They can't accept that their own patterns shape their lives. They blame fate, other people, or life's unfairness. But the more they resist, karma returns sharper until they finally pause and look. So how do we dissolve karma? Not through rituals or forced repentance, but through awakening, through sitting quietly, asking honestly, what belief inside me led me here? When asked with sincerity, one question can unlock everything. Freedom. Because once you ask it, you no longer remain a victim of karma. You become someone who can transform it by transforming your mind. You don't need to run. Just the next time a thought like, I'm not enough, or I have to earn love, arises, you respond with mindful presence. Ask, is this true, or just a habit of the mind? When you live with that awareness, karma stops running on autopilot. The cycle ends. Because what generated karma ignorance dissolves in mindfulness. Meaning, if that X comes back, you won't fall for the same game again. If a similar person shows up in a new form, you'll see the signs early, no illusions, no excuses. You see and you choose again, with clarity. And when you choose differently, You begin writing new karma, one not driven by fear but by wisdom, not dictated by lack but by restored self-worth. 11. The soul lessons you learn from a narcissist. Sometimes, the person who hurt you the most is the very one who brought you closer to your true self. Not through kind words or tender love, but through heartbreak, through cold silences that pierced you, through blank stares, through wounds wrapped in the disguise of love. You used to believe genuinely that sincerity was enough, that if you were patient, kind, and truly listened, the other person would eventually change, that love could soothe the deep pain inside them. And you tried, over and over, until one day you saw it clearly. Love without respect is just an illusion. The Buddha once said, "Even the sweetest words mean nothing if they are not rooted in compassion and mindfulness. They are like a flower with no fragrance." And narcissists? They're often masters of language. They know exactly what to say to hook you in. They know how to make you feel like you're the center of their world. But what they can't sustain is presence. Real, grounded presence. You learned that the hard way, that someone can be physically there every day, but emotionally absent, that a hug doesn't always carry warmth, that "I love you" means very little when it comes with control, punishment, or disregard for your dignity. Eventually, you started to see presence matters more than performance. You stopped falling for the late-night flowers. You stopped forgetting yesterday's cruelty just because today they acted sweet. You stopped forgiving just because they seemed sorry only to hurt you again in a different form. There was a time when your compassion was so big, you accepted what was never okay. You turned a blind eye. You made excuses for them. You told yourself, "They've been through a lot. I should be understanding." But you forgot one important truth. Compassion isn't meant to be a weapon used against you. In Buddhism, compassion must walk hand in hand with wisdom. Compassion without wisdom is like a boat without a rudder. You're easily swept away by the emotional tides of others. And narcissists, whether consciously or not often, manipulate your compassion. They make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. They twist situations so you apologize for things you didn't do. They use your kindness to make you feel weak. And one day you realized even compassion needs boundaries. You learned to tell the difference between helping someone and harming yourself, between forgiving out of love and forgiving out of fear of losing them, between yielding because of empathy and tolerating abuse out of emotional dependence. You learned to say no, not with anger, but with peace. You learned to stay silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you no longer wanted to argue over what was already clear. You learned to walk away not because you stopped loving, but because you had loved enough, and now it was time to love yourself. These lessons, they don't come from books. They come from nights you cried yourself empty, from mornings you woke up with a heart too tired to beat with hope, from moments you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the dimness in your eyes. But then, something miraculous happened. The light came back, slowly, gently, and you realized you weren't destroyed. You were reborn, like a seed buried deep in the soil. The darkness didn't kill it. It was in the dark that it began to sprout. That person who tried to break you, they unknowingly helped you realize what you will never accept again. And that was their gift, whether they meant to give it or not. The lesson from a narcissist isn't bitterness. It isn't hatred. It's a sacred reminder. Love with an open heart, but never lose your clarity. Be compassionate, but never abandon yourself. Be kind, but don't let your kindness be exploited. You are not who you used to be. You don't hand out forgiveness for what is clearly unacceptable. You no longer shrink yourself to keep a love that lacks mutual respect. You no longer call your suffering destiny, because now you have mindfulness. You have boundaries. And most importantly, you have the clarity of a soul that has walked through darkness and come out the other side. 12. The narcissist is the final test before liberation. You may have been through many relationships before. You may have longed for a love that felt whole, steady, and real. But no one ever shook your soul the way this one person did. Until you met the narcissist. They didn't just enter your life, they took over your mind. And somewhere along the way, you started asking yourself, why did I stay so long? Why did my heart keep holding uneven when everything was already so painfully clear? Here's the truth. A narcissist doesn't come to bind you. They're not the chain around your ankle, trapping you in something you can't escape. They're not the jailer. They're just the person you hand the key to. And when you finally choose to rise above them, you are the one who unlocks the door and walks out. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "You are the owner of your karma. You are the master of your path. No one comes into your life to make you suffer. Karma simply brings you to the exact place where your deepest lesson is waiting. The lesson about your own worth." The narcissist? They're like the final exam. They show up just when you're tired of trying, when you've held on too long, when you've given too much hope to things that didn't deserve it. And when they arrive, you're faced with a crossroads. Do I keep accepting this again? Or do I finally let go and walk toward my freedom? They cross your boundaries. They silence your true voice. They make you forget who you are. That's why they're the final test, because they show you, through pain, what you've learned from all your past heartbreak. Not to punish you, but to help you see one life-changing truth. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy of love. Love isn't something you earn, prove, or sacrifice yourself to receive. Love is not defined by who picks you. Love is how you choose to treat yourself. A story from ancient Buddhist teachings tells of a wise sage who gave up everything to seek the path. At the foot of a mountain, he met a thief in disguise. The sage said, "You don't have to follow someone else's God. Just choose the wisdom within yourself." That statement wasn't just mystical, it was an awakening. That your value doesn't come from who chooses you. It comes from the moment you choose yourself. The narcissist comes as a mirror, not to be loved by you, but to be admired, to be obeyed. But the moment you realize that is the moment you start living in your truth. You free yourself by returning them to themselves, not with rage, not with revenge, but with peace. Because when you hand back the key, when you stop locking yourself into a relationship built on disrespect, you learn your final lesson. You are worthy of love not because someone picks you, but because you finally chose to honor yourself. The Buddha said, "One who honors themselves holds everything." When you let go because they don't deserve your love, but because you deserve your peace, you step into a space of liberation. A space where no one else gets to define your worth. A space where your inner voice becomes the loudest one. Sure, maybe you won't forget them right away. Maybe you'll still remember the charming words, the perfect moments, the illusion of everything being right. But that's all it was, memory. And memory doesn't have the power to bind you. Only when you stop confusing being chosen with being loved can you finally cross over into a life where love isn't something you fight for, but something that flows from within. And that is the greatest gift the narcissist unknowingly gave you. Not through love, but through awakening. And once you wake up, you no longer wait for someone to validate your worth. You no longer look for someone else to free you, because now you know your peace, your freedom, your dignity, they all come from within, from that quiet, unshakable place where no one chooses you, because you have already chosen yourself. 13. Forgiveness means deep understanding, not forgetting. There's a common misunderstanding that many people carry with them throughout their healing journey, that to forgive, you must forget. That forgiveness means pretending nothing happened, that you have to erase the past as if it never existed. But no, in Buddhism, forgiveness has never meant forgetting. It means seeing clearly, seeing deeply, and understanding all the way to the root. Because without deep understanding, forgiveness becomes just a performance, a fragile shell of morality. And if you keep trying to forget the things that once broke your heart, the pain doesn't really go away. It just gets buried. One day, a Buddhist friend came to see me at the meditation center in California. Her voice was heavy. She asked, "Teacher, I've tried to forgive the one who betrayed me. I haven't brought it up again. I didn't lash out. I haven't seen them since. But why? Every time I remember what happened, does my heart still tighten? Why do I still feel like I haven't truly let go?" I sat quietly for a moment, then gently replied, "Because you've been trying to forget, but you haven't truly understood. Forgiveness isn't about slamming the door on the past. It's about daring to open it, to look straight at it, to understand it deeply enough that you no longer need to carry it as a burden." In the Buddhist teachings, forgiveness isn't a moral obligation. It's a path to liberation. It's part of loving kindness, but loving kindness isn't weakness. It's compassion grounded in wisdom. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha said, "Radiate kindness to all beings with no hatred, no contempt, no exclusion." But he never said, "Go back to the one who hurt you." Compassion doesn't mean being naive. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to old roles, old relationships, or old illusions. In fact, some wounds exist to remind us, don't go back to the place that made you lose yourself. Forgiveness is the brave choice of someone who no longer wants to drag the past behind them. It's not about excusing someone's behavior. It's about making a conscious, awakened promise to yourself. I choose not to let the darkness of the past block the light of my present. A fellow practitioner once said something I'll never forget. When you forgive, you're not saying they were right. You're saying you're strong enough now not to let that pain control you anymore. The past may have shaped who you are, but it doesn't get to decide who you'll become. And something amazing happens when you truly understand the role of the past in your awakening. You stop asking, "Why did they do that to me?" And you begin to see, what did I need to learn from this to grow? You don't forgive to let them off the hook. You forgive so you can walk forward free from the emotional prison you built around yourself. A classic Buddhist story tells of two monks crossing a river. Near the shore, they came across an elderly woman in need of help. One monk lifted her up and carried her across. They continued walking. A few miles later, the other monk finally broke his silence and said, "Why did you carry that woman? That goes against the rules." The first monk smiled and replied, "I set her down long ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That's the essence of forgiveness. Sometimes, the people who hurt us only stay in our lives because we carry them in our minds and hearts long after they've gone. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about setting them down. Not because it didn't matter, but because that part of your inner growth is complete. When you forgive, your heart expands. Your eyes see clearer. And you begin to understand, even those who left you with scars came bearing a lesson. A lesson in self-love. A lesson in boundaries. A lesson in how to walk away without hate. To keep your kindness, but also your clarity. Forgiveness doesn't need a reason. It needs depth. And that depth is what leads to real peace. In the end, forgiveness is the most sacred thing you can offer yourself. Not to erase what happened, but to see it as an essential step on your path to awakening. A turning point that once led you to pain, but now brings you home to light. And when you forgive not just with words, but with deep understanding, you no longer feel the need to forget, because the past has already transformed into wisdom. And when that journey is complete, when you no longer resent the one who hurt you, when you stop clinging to what cannot be changed, peace is no longer a distant dream. You realize forgiveness isn't a gift to someone else. It's the freedom you return to yourself. And the person who once brought you to tears may have been the very one who helped you grow in spirit. No one enters your life by accident. Even those who broke your heart were playing a role in a greater unfolding. A script life designed to wake you up. Forgiveness, then, is no longer something you have to do, but something you want to do, because you no longer wish to carry one more stone in your already heavy backpack of the soul. So allow yourself to move forward, not carrying the past like a wound, but holding it as a lesson, a silent teacher. And if one day you can look back at what once hurt you and smile gently, then you'll know you've walked through it with loving kindness and with wisdom. If what I shared today resonates with you, please help spread this message by subscribing to Buddhism Seeds, clicking the like button, sharing this video with someone who needs it, and leaving a comment below. Every word you share is like a seed of peace planted in this chaotic world. May you have the courage to forgive and the peace to keep walking forward.